The massive Imperial warship Dominator hung in space above Earth, like a metal mountain blocking out the stars. Commander Vex of the Galactic Empire stood on his bridge, looking down at the blue planet with all four of his eyes. His gray skin rippled with confidence. The Empire had conquered 1,000 worlds. This primitive planet would be number 1001. Send the message, Vex ordered his communication officer. The ultimatum was simple: surrender or be destroyed. The Empire gave every world 3 solar rotations to decide. Most surrendered immediately when they saw the fleet of 500 warships. Earth's leaders asked for time to discuss. Vex laughed a harsh sound like grinding metal. These humans had barely left their own solar system. Their ships were toys compared to Imperial technology. On Earth, General Adams sat in the underground bunker with the World Defense Council. The alien message played on repeat on the main screen. Around the table, leaders from every nation looked grim. They had 3 days. Our entire space fleet is 40 ships, Admiral Johnson reported. Their scanners show 500. Each one is 10 times bigger than anything we have. What about our weapons? President Williams asked. Standard missiles and rail guns. Nothing. That could scratch their shields based on what we're seeing. General Adams stood up. Then we don't fight their way. We fight ours. The room went quiet. Adams pulled up a classified file on the screen. Project Swarm. We've been developing it for asteroid mining, but with modifications, ... The next 70 hours were the busiest in human history. Every factory, every 3D printer, every assembly line on Earth switched to one purpose. They weren't building ships. They were building something else entirely. Commander Vex grew impatient as the deadline approached. The humans had sent no surrender, but their ships hadn't moved either. Strange energy readings came from the planet, but nothing that concerned him. Probably panic and chaos. He'd seen it before on other worlds. Time's up, Vex announced as the 3rd day ended. Begin the attack. Target their major cities first. The Imperial fleet moved forward in perfect formation, a wall of death approaching Earth. Their plasma cannons charged, ready to turn the surface to glass. Then something strange appeared on their sensors. Commander, detecting objects launching from Earth. Thousands ... No, millions of them. Vex looked at the screen and laughed again. The objects were tiny, no bigger than escape pods. They're throwing debris at us? How pathetic. Our shields will. He never finished the sentence. The first wave hit, the human. Swarm wasn't ships. It was 10 million drones, each one the size of a refrigerator, packed with explosives and a simple AI. They didn't need to be strong. They just needed to be many. The Imperial shields were designed to stop large weapons, massive energy blasts, and capital ship attacks. They weren't designed for this. The drones hit like angry hornets. 1,000 would slam into one section of shield, overloading it for just a second. In that second, 100 more would slip through and attach to the hull. Then they would explode. Small explosions barely enough to dent the armor, but there were millions of them. Shields failing on sections 7 through 15. An officer shouted. Impossible, Vex roared. Increase power to more alarms, more drones. They came in waves, endless waves. For every 1,000 destroyed, 10,000 more appeared. The space around the Imperial fleet became a storm of explosions and debris. Then the second surprise came. Hidden among the drone swarm were Earth's 40 ships, modified with experimental stealth plating made from metamaterials. While the Empire's sensors were overwhelmed by millions of contacts, the human ships slipped close. They fired everything they had into the gaps the drones had created. The Dominator shook as missiles found weak points. Smaller Imperial ships began to break apart, their crews unable to handle attacks from so many directions at once. The perfect formation became chaos. Commander Vex watched his tactical display in disbelief. In 300 years of conquest, the Empire had never faced anything like this. They were prepared for civilization-ending weapons, for massive fleets, for exotic technologies. They weren't prepared for a species that would turn mining equipment into a weapon and throw their entire industrial output at them in one desperate, brilliant gamble. Admiral Johnson stood in Earth's command center, watching the battle unfold on the main display. The room was packed with military officials and technicians, all monitoring different aspects of humanity's desperate gamble. The drone swarm continued its relentless assault on the Imperial fleet, but Johnson knew they were burning through their reserves fast. Drone count at 60% and falling, reported Captain Blake from her station. We're losing them faster than calculated. It's working, though, General Adams said, pointing at the tactical display. Look at their formation. They're pulling back. The Imperial fleet was indeed retreating, but not fleeing. They were regrouping, adapting. The larger ships moved to shield the smaller ones, creating defensive spheres that their point defense weapons could better protect. Commander Vex was learning. On the Dominator, Vex studied the attack pattern. These humans were clever, but cleverness only went so far against superior firepower. Adjust shield frequency to rotating modulation. Set point defense to wide scatter. They're using predictive algorithms, make our movements random. The changes took effect immediately. Drones that had been slipping through began exploding harmlessly against adapted shields. The kill rate jumped from thousands per minute to tens of thousands. Sir, they're adapting, Captain Blake reported to Johnson. Drone effectiveness dropping to 30%, 20-5, double quotes. Johnson nodded grimly. They'd known this would happen. The swarm was never meant to win by itself. It was meant to buy time and create chaos. Time for Phase 2. Launch the hammers, Johnson ordered, deep in Earth's oceans, hidden in modified submarine bays. 12 special weapons activated. They weren't really hammers. The name came from ancient mythology, weapons of the gods. Each one was a repurposed asteroid mining vessel, stripped down to engines and frame, loaded with something special. The hammers launched from the oceans like missiles, breaking through the atmosphere in seconds. They were ugly things, all function and no form, built in. Desperate haste, but they didn't need to be pretty. They just needed to be fast. New contacts. The Imperial sensor officer announced. 12 large objects approaching at... That can't be right. What? Vex demanded. They're accelerating beyond safety limits. Their engines will burn out in minutes at this rate. Vex understood immediately. Suicide runs. Concentrate fire on those ships. All batteries. The Imperial fleet opened fire, hundreds of plasma beams and missiles streaking toward the hammers. 3 died instantly, vaporized by concentrated fire. 2 more broke apart from the stress of their own acceleration. But 7 kept coming, their simple AI pilots making constant micro-adjustments to avoid the worst of the fire. Inside each hammer was humanity's secret weapon, antimatter. Not much Earth could only produce a few grams total, but enough. Technology was barely understood, incredibly unstable, and insanely dangerous. Using it broke every safety protocol humans had ever written. But extinction had a way of changing priorities. The first hammer reached the Imperial formation. Point defense weapons shredded its hull, but momentum carried the wreckage forward. It hit the Imperial cruiser Inevitable and detonated. The antimatter reaction was visible from Earth's surface, a new star born and dying in an instant. When the light faded, the Inevitable was gone, along with 3 ships that had been too close. By the void, Vex whispered. Matter-antimatter weapons were banned by the Galactic Council 500 years ago. No civilized species would use them, but humans were part of the Galactic Council. They hadn't signed any treaties, and they were fighting for survival. 6 more hammers found targets. The Imperial fleet's orderly retreat became a rout as ships desperately tried to avoid the suicide weapons. The antimatter explosions created expanding spheres of destruction, radiation, and debris that made large sections of space impassable. Meanwhile, the drone swarm adapted too. With the Imperial fleet in chaos, they concentrated on damaged ships, finishing off vessels wounded by the hammers. Earth's 40 ships darted in and out, launching missiles and retreating before return fire could find them. Fleet strength at 60%, an Imperial officer reported. We've lost 200 ships. Vex couldn't believe it. In one day, a primitive species had destroyed 200 Imperial vessels. The Empire had never lost more than a dozen ships in any conquest. His 4 eyes blazed with rage. Send word to Imperial Command, he ordered. Request the Grand Fleet. All of it. Commander, that's 50,000 ships. For one primitive world? They're not primitive, Vex snarled, watching another Imperial ship die to the swarm. Not anymore. 3 weeks passed in tense preparation. The battered Imperial fleet held position beyond the moon's orbit, too proud to retreat fully, but too damaged to attack. On Earth, humanity worked around the clock. Every resource was devoted to building. More drones, more weapons, more of anything that could fight. General Adams hadn't slept in days. The victory against the First Fleet had been costly. They'd used most of their antimatter, billions of drones, and lost 12 brave pilots in the death. Hammer runs. Now reports said something called the Grand Fleet was coming. The name alone made his stomach turn. How many ships are we talking about? President Williams asked during the emergency meeting. Intelligence intercepts suggest 50,000. Admiral Johnson replied. The room went silent. We beat 500 and they send 50,000? Someone whispered. We didn't beat them, Adams corrected. We bloodied their nose, made them angry. And angry empires do stupid things. Or they crush us completely, Williams said. Maybe, but we've learned things too. Their shields have weaknesses. Their formations are predictable. And they still don't understand human nature. The detection came at dawn, Earth time. Hyperspace ruptures, thousands of them, appearing just beyond Mars. The Grand Fleet had arrived. It was a sight that should have broken human spirit, a wall of metal that blocked out the stars, stretching across space like a plague of locusts. Grand Admiral Kron commanded from the super dreadnought Emperor's Wrath, a ship so large it had its own gravity. He was ancient by Imperial standards, had conquered more worlds than any other officer. He looked at the tactical reports from Vex's fleet with disgust. You let primitives do this to you? Kron's voice was ice. They used banned weapons, Vex. Protested via communication. Antimatter, swarm tactics, excuses. You forgot the first rule of conquest. Never underestimate your enemy. Stand aside. Watch how the Empire truly fights. Kron's strategy was simple and brutal. No warnings, no ultimatums. The Grand Fleet would advance in a sphere formation, each ship covering others, creating an impenetrable wall of overlapping shields and firepower. They would get close enough that Earth couldn't launch surprises, then systematically destroy everything military, civilian, everything. But Earth had been busy too. Sir, detecting massive energy buildup from Earth, a sensor officer reported. To Kron, their weapons? No, sir. It's their sun. Solar activity is spiking. Kron's many eyes narrowed. That was impossible. Species couldn't control stars, could they? On Earth, Dr. Park stood in the control room of Project Helios. It had been theoretical, until 3 weeks ago using Earth's magnetic field and a network of satellites to create a directed solar weapon, not to control the sun, but to channel what was already there. Magnetic field aligned, a technician reported. Satellite network ready. We only get one shot at this. Then make it count, Hark said. The Grand Fleet advanced steadily. Confidently, they were still beyond Mars when Earth fired. It wasn't visible at first. Solar wind is invisible in space. But the satellites around Earth focused it, compressed it, turned a gentle breeze into a hurricane of charged particles traveling at significant fractions of light speed. The particle beam hit the Grand Fleet's front line. Shields designed for energy weapons and projectiles struggled against the raw stellar wind. Electronics fried. Sensors went blind. Ships designed for the cold of space suddenly faced the heat of a star. Shields holding but degrading, Kron's officer reported. 20% failure rate in forward sections. Push through, Kron ordered. It's a desperation weapon. They can't maintain it. He was right. Project Helios burned out its satellites in minutes. But those minutes were enough for Phase 2. Hidden in the asteroid belt, humanity had placed their second surprise. Not weapons, but mirrors. Thousands of them, each one a kilometer wide, made from reflective foil. They'd been positioned weeks ago, waiting. Now they turned, catching sunlight and focusing it. The concentrated beams hit the Grand Fleet from multiple angles. Not enough to destroy ships, but enough to blind sensors already damaged by solar wind. For crucial minutes, the Grand Fleet was flying partly blind. That's when the new swarm launched. Not from Earth, but from the Moon, from Mars, from hidden bases throughout the system. Humanity had turned their entire solar system into a weapon. Drones, missiles, railgun platforms, even modified civilian ships. Everything that could fight was fighting. Contact from all directions, the tactical officer shouted. They're everywhere. Kron watched his perfect formation begin to crack. The humans weren't trying to win a straight fight. They were turning space itself into chaos, using their home territory advantage in ways the Empire never expected. The battle raged for 18 hours. Space between Earth and Mars became a graveyard of twisted metal and frozen atmosphere. The Grand Fleet's superior numbers and firepower took a terrible toll, but humanity's unconventional tactics kept them from achieving a quick victory. Grand Admiral Kron stood rigid on his bridge, his ancient face showing the strain of the longest battle in Imperial history. Around him, officers worked frantically to coordinate 50,000 ships against an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. Status report, he demanded. We've destroyed approximately 80% of their drone swarms and 60% of their identified defense platforms. But sir, ... The officer hesitated. We've lost 8,000 ships. 8,000? The number was staggering. The Empire hadn't lost that many ships in the last millennium combined. Their antimatter weapons? Depleted, we believe. They haven't used them in the last 6 hours. Kron nodded. Without those terrifying weapons, victory was certain. Costly, but certain. Begin final approach to Earth. Maximum bombardment pattern. On Earth, the situation was desperate. General Adams looked at the displays showing their remaining force's 15 ships, maybe 1 million drones, and whatever tricks they had left. Not enough to stop 42,000 Imperial vessels. Sir, Captain Blake interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Park is requesting immediate conference. Says it's about Project Exodus. Adams frowned. Exodus was the evacuation protocol siege ships to preserve humanity if Earth fell. Put him through. Park's face appeared on screen, haggard but excited. General, we've been looking at this wrong. We keep trying to fight them ship to ship. But what if we didn't fight their ships at all? Explain. The Imperial fleet uses a hive command structure. Everything roots through the command ship that's Super Dreadnought. If we could get to it. It's in the center of 40,000 ships, Doctor. I know, but we have one advantage they don't expect. Park pulled up a schematic. Human biology. Our reaction times, our ability to handle G-forces that would kill most galactic species. We've been limiting ourselves to match what we think space combat should be. What if we stopped limiting ourselves? Adams studied the plan. It was insane. It would likely kill whoever attempted it, but it might work. I need volunteers, Adams said. Pilots willing to fly a mission they won't come back from. Every pilot in the fleet volunteered. Commander Tom Wilson was chosen to lead the mission. 5 pilots, 5 specially modified fighters stripped of everything except engines, minimal life support, and a special payload. The modifications were brutal. The inertial dampeners were removed. The acceleration would literally crush a normal human within minutes. They would have to fly on stimulants and pain suppressors, knowing their bodies were dying with each second. You understand what this means, Adams told them before launch. Even if you succeed, the G-forces will cause massive internal damage. You have maybe 10 minutes before organ failure. Wilson smiled grimly. 10 minutes to save 8 billion people? Best trade I ever made. The 5 fighters launched during the chaos of another drone wave. They were so small, so fast, that Imperial sensors dismissed them as debris. The pilots pushed their engines beyond all limits, accelerating at rates that turned their vision red, then black at the edges. Blood vessels burst. Bones creaked under the strain. But they kept going, straight toward the Emperor's wrath. Small craft approaching, an Imperial officer noted. Collision course. Destroy them, Kron ordered absently, focused on the larger. Battle. Point defense weapons fired, but the human fighters moved like nothing the targeting computers could predict. They jinked and rolled at speeds that should have torn the ships apart. 3 fighters died, their pilots finally succumbing to the massive forces or Imperial fire. Wilson and 1 other made it through. They hit the Emperor's wrath at a significant percentage of light speed. The fighters punched through shields weakened. By hours of combat, through armor, deep into the ship's structure. The payload they carried wasn't antimatter. It was something simpler. Nuclear weapons, yes, but also computer viruses, electromagnetic pulse generators, and something special Dr. Park had designed. The explosions were small compared to the massive dreadnought, but they were perfectly placed. The computer virus, delivered directly into the ship's core systems, spread through the Imperial network. The EMPs disrupted internal communications. And Park's special weapon, a compound that reacted violently with a specific atmosphere, the Imperial species breath spread through the ventilation. The Emperor's wrath didn't explode. It simply stopped. Lights went out. Engines died. The command ship that coordinated the entire Grand Fleet went silent. Across 40,000 ships, chaos erupted as the centralized command structure collapsed. The death of the Emperor's wrath sent shockwaves through the Grand Fleet, not physical, but psychological. The Imperial military had operated under centralized command for millennia. Individual initiative was discouraged, independent thinking punished. Now, 40,000 ships found themselves without orders, without coordination, without purpose. Some tried to continue the attack. Others pulled back. Many simply stopped, their captains paralyzed by indecision. The perfect Imperial formation dissolved into chaos. On Earth. General Adams watched the enemy fleets collapse with grim satisfaction and deep sorrow. Wilson and his volunteers had done the impossible, but at the ultimate cost. Their sacrifice had given humanity a chance. All remaining forces, concentrate fire on their scattered formations, Adams ordered. Don't let them regroup. The remnants of Earth's defenses struck hard at the confused Imperial ships. Without coordinated point defense, even the small drone swarms became deadly again. Earth's 15 remaining ships darted between the larger vessels, hitting and running, exploiting the chaos. But it was what happened next that truly ended the battle. Throughout the Grand Fleet, something strange was occurring. The virus Wilson had delivered wasn't just disrupting systems, it was doing something else. On every Imperial ship, screens began displaying images. Pictures of Earth, of humans, of children playing, families laughing, cities building, art, music, culture. Everything that made humanity human. And with the images came a message, broadcast. In perfect Imperial Standard language, we are humanity. We did not choose this war. We asked for peace and were offered slavery. We asked for time and were given death. You came to our home with 50,000 ships to murder our children. We stopped you with courage, creativity, and sacrifice. We are not your enemy. We never were. But if you make us fight, we will fight with everything we have, everything we are, and everything we might become. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Leave now. Leave and never return. Or stay and discover what a species fighting for its children can really do. The message repeated over and over on every screen in every ship. Commander Vex, watching from his damaged flagship, felt something he'd never experienced in 3 centuries of conquest: doubt. These humans had faced impossible odds and found a way. They'd turned mining equipment into weapons, their star into a cannon, their pilots into guided missiles. What else were they capable of? Throughout the Grand Fleet, similar thoughts spread. The Empire had conquered peaceful species, warlike species, ancient species, and young species. But they'd never faced a species quite like this one that could be simultaneously creative and destructive, compassionate and ruthless, afraid and fearless. The virus did more than show images. It also unlocked something else: communications between ships that didn't go through Imperial command. For the first time, captains could talk to each other directly. And they did. My ship has lost 40% of its crew. These humans fight like madness itself. They used their own sun against us. The Grand Admiral is dead. Who commands now? I have families back home. Is this world worth their lives? The doubt spread like another virus, ship to ship, mind to mind. Then came the final blow. Earth's combined governments broadcast a message directly to the Grand Fleet, using the virus's communication channels. To all Imperial vessels, we offer you a choice. Surrender, and we will treat you with dignity, help repair your ships, and send you home with a message of peace for your empire. Continue fighting, and we will activate the Omega Protocol. You've seen what we can do with limited resources. Do you really want to see what we prepared as our final option? It was a bluff. Earth had no Omega Protocol, no final weapon. They were almost out of everything. But the Imperial fleet didn't know that. All they knew was that a species that turned asteroids into weapons and pilots into suicide missiles probably had something worse in reserve. One by one, Imperial ships began powering down their weapons. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds. The surrender cascade spread through the fleet like dominoes falling. Within an hour, the largest armada in galactic history had surrendered to a species that had barely left its home system. Commander Vex, given temporary command of the surrendering fleet, sent the formal message: the Imperial Grand Fleet accepts Earth's terms. We surrender. On Earth, celebration mixed with exhaustion. They had won, but at terrible cost. Thousands had died, resources were depleted, and they'd made an enemy of the largest empire in the galaxy. But they had survived. And in surviving, they'd sent a message to the galaxy. Humanity was here, and they would not go quietly into anyone's empire. The war was over. The real story of humanity in the galaxy was just beginning. EPILOG 5 years later, Earth stood as an independent world, recognized by the Galactic Council. The defeated Grand Fleet had returned to Imperial space with tales of the warrior. Species that fought like no other. The Empire, facing rebellions from other conquered worlds inspired by Earth's example, never returned. General Adams, now retired, stood at the memorial for the fallen pilots. Wilson's name was at the top. Man who flew into death to save his world. A young girl approached, holding her father's hand. Were they heroes? She asked, looking at the names. Adams knelt beside her. They were human. That was enough. In space above, ships from 100 worlds came to trade with Earth, to learn from the species that had done the impossible. Humanity's greatest weapon hadn't been technology or strategy. It had been the simple refusal to give up. The galaxy would never be the same. The end asterisk.